is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but
Okay. Are you ready, Jeremy?
This conference will now be recorded.
I'd like to call the village board meeting to order for Tuesday, August 24th. Roll call, please.
President Kardowski,
Here.
Trustee Paul,
Here.
Trustee Kubaki is excused, Trustee Zerbal,
Here.
Trustee Williams is excused, Trustee Krieger,
Here.
and Trustee Flukie.
Here.
Please stand for the pledge.
allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please remember the men and women throughout the world in uniform. Okay, number 4, I need action on the agenda. I have no changes.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 5, action on the open and closed minutes from July 27, 2021.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve those minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 6, comments from the public must be limited to items not on the agenda, must state your name and address, limited to 5 minutes. The board's role is to listen and not discuss the item. Personnel issues cannot be discussed nor individuals named. The board is not able to take action at this meeting. Is there anybody who would like to comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, moving on. Number 7, written communications and/or announcements. I have none.
I just have a quick announcement. I wanted to thank the Public Works Department. I met with a group of residents over on Cypress. They had a concern on drainage in the area, and Public Works came out almost the next day and took care of it and cleared it out, and the residents were very happy. So they sent me a thank you, and I just wanted to share it with staff as well.
Thank you. Okay, number 8, action on consent agenda. 8A, action on operator's license. B, action on change of agent Marcus Cinemas of Wisconsin, LLC, DBA Bay Park Cinema, Dawn Majewski. C, general fund financial report. D, budgeted expenditures. And E, department reports. Anybody want to pull anything, or else I need a motion to approve?
I just had one question on the budgeted ones, and it was just a curiosity question. There was an expenditure, McQueen Equipment. What was that for? It was $279,000. I'm guessing it's a big piece of equipment. I was just curious what it was.
It's a new garbage truck.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Doug, is that in operation yet?
The newest one is not.
It's
still
not.
It's still at the garage getting outfitted.
Okay, the only reason I'm asking, they picked up the garbage as usual, and the truck was really quiet. I didn't know if it was the new one or not, is the reason for the question. Must have been one of the newer, older ones.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 9, public hearing. A, public hearing regarding ordinance 08-1-21, amending section 17-6-500, Village of Ashwaubenon Municipal Code relating to off-street parking. Aaron.
Okay, this ordinance amendment has gone through Site Plan Review Committee and Plan Commission. The ordinance amendment is meant to, I guess, right-size our parking requirements for restaurants at all, as indicated in the ordinance. This came about as a result of some of the COVID issues and the desire for outdoor patios for seating. A few of the restaurants approached me and asked, we'd like to put a patio in, and how do we do that? I took a look at their what they're proposing, weighed that against the ordinance in terms of parking, because again, the patio would extend into their existing parking areas. A couple instances, they could not put in outdoor patios because it would reduce the amount of parking below the minimum standard that we had as a village. I took a look at the amount of parking that's required for the village, and in your packet, you can see a spreadsheet that I put together comparing the village of Ashwaubenon against some of what I term peer communities in terms of their parking requirements. In summary, our parking requirement came out definitely the highest out of all of those reviewed. What I'm proposing to do is again, what I term right size the off-street parking requirements for those uses to better reflect current uses of how people now use rideshare, biking, walking. And the reality is the numbers that were used were typically from the 1950s federal guidance when, again, cars and big parking lots were all the rage. So that's just not the case anymore. So that's the background on the proposed amendment.
Okay, is there anybody that would like to speak for or against this ordinance, since this is a public hearing? Come on up to the mic, state your name and address, please, for the record.
Jordan Saunders, 1739 North 6th Street, Sheboygan.
Okay, did you want to speak for or against this?
Yeah, so I'm with Parker John's Barbecue and Pizza, speaking for the idea. We have 4 locations here in Wisconsin, our newest one here in town. 2 out of our 4 locations did some huge patio expansion projects this past year. I think COVID definitely a catalyst behind this, with the need and the want for our guests to have an outdoor dining option. We started a project early spring at our Sheboygan location that had an existing outdoor dining area to begin with. We've seen great success. We just had our 4th anniversary at this location. Outdoor dining during the summer months, always a huge hit. We saw the need to expand that. We pretty much doubled the size of our outdoor dining area at our Sheboygan location. And then in Menasha, we just completed our deck expansion there. It had an existing deck similar to Sheboygan's. We just needed to make it larger. We saw that our restaurants were going on kind of unnecessary waits. So many people didn't want to sit in a almost empty dining room. They wanted to sit sit outside. So we expanded the outdoor area at our Menasha location as well, almost doubling the size of that. We're a very family-friendly restaurant. Our restaurant operates, normal hours, we're open until 9. Our restaurants do have a bar inside, but the bar really closes when the restaurants close. We're not that late night kind of area. So our outdoor dining options are very family-friendly. We do live music outside on Sundays in the afternoon, which we'd be looking to, if we were able to put on an outdoor dining area here in town. We do similar things. We do live music. The area that we are really looking at would be to the north of our building. It's really right now not used for parking. It's more as a pass along to get to the front of the building, to the back of the building. That can be done on either side of the building, but this is just one of those routes. So we would be looking, if we're able to do outdoor dining on that north side of the building between us and the car dealership to the north of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Jordan?
You said you were putting that on the north side of the building. Is that taking away any parking spaces at all? Or is that just a drive-through?
Currently, it is just used as a drive-through. And like I mentioned, there is another route on the south side of the building to make your way to the back of the building. It's kind of like the restaurant's on an island, and you're able to get around either way.
Okay, I'm familiar with your parking lot, but not the north side, so, okay, very good.
Aaron, that would have to come through site plan anyway, would it not?
That's correct. Any permanent outdoor patio would have to come through site plan for the review.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Need a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second to close the hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 10, action items. Action regarding ordinance 081-1-21, amending section 17-6-500, Village of Ashwaubenon Municipal Code relating to off-street parking. You're up again, Aaron.
All right. A couple of things to add on from discussion at Site Plan Review Committee and Planning Commission. Both did recommend approval. At Site Plan Review Committee, they had a good discussion about the use of rideshare, so Uber, Lyft, so on and so forth, and how that is changing some of the dynamic of this. They did ask that we take a look at dedicating a few off-street parking spaces for those types of uses to better facilitate the pickup and drop-off of people using those rideshare options, which from a staff standpoint, I think is a good idea. I believe Plan Commission also agreed that was something we should be looking at. I have touched base with Tony on this already, and it's something that we're going to touch base with public safety on and figure out some locations that would seem to make sense beyond just Packer game days. In terms of other items, Heartland Pizza also did issue or send in an email in support of the proposed change, as they'd like to put in a patio during the summer months. And I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
Okay, any questions or a motion?
I have a question. Aaron, you had mentioned that there's less need for parking spaces because the ordinance was done in 1950 and maybe there's not as many cars and people are walking and biking. Is there any consideration to give credit to the businesses that put in bike parking specifically? Because obviously that's taking away some cars. Have we considered looking into that as well as the rideshare?
Right. We haven't put into account bicyclists into the formula, but through Site Plan Review Committee, they certainly review that and they take that into account when they approve the site plan.
So when Parker Johns would come in to expand to a patio, then at that time, Site Plan Review could look at it and say, talk about bicycle parking or adding bicycle parking. I know with new plans, you require looking at bicycle parking, but would you require it in that case as well?
It's something that would come through the Site Plan Review Committee, and as far as it come from a recommendation from the Bike and Ped advisor we have on the, it's Kyle Jago actually serves in the committee.
Okay.
All right, as Aaron said, Site Plan had a real good conversation about this. The job share came up, and that was another good thought. So if there's no other questions, I'll move to approve the Ashwaubenon Municipal Code regarding to off-street parking.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 08-1-21. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10B, action on a request for an accessory garage and parking lot expansion for Capital Credit Union located at 825 Morris Avenue, parcel VA-67. Aaron.
Okay. Capital Credit Union is selling off a portion of their land. They're building on Morris Avenue to an adjacent property owner. That building has their garage on it for some of their vehicles. They're proposing to build a new garage on the property to be towards the south end of the parking lot, as well as then extend the parking lot in the southeast corner of their property. So this would replace the existing garage. Exterior materials will be similar to the existing building. At Plan Commission and Site Plan Review Committee, there was a request from Capital Credit Union. In the plans, they do show a standard pitched roof. There was a request that they be allowed to have either a pitched roof or a flat roof, consistent with their current garage and their building. They'd like to go out and get bids on that for the garage with either a flat roof or a pitched roof. Both Site Plan Review Committee and Plan Commission were fine with that, as is staff. Any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions, comments? or a motion?
Now, that came between to the site plan and plan commission. Like Aaron said, there were no real comments about it other than the roof and the structure itself being, meeting up to the codes. So I'll move to approve Capital Credit Unions located at 825 Morse Avenue, parcel VA-67.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would you like to add with either a flat or pitched roof to that motion?
I believe we went with a pitched roof on that.
Actually, we gave them the option.
Oh, you gave them the option?
Yes.
Right.
We preferred the pitch, though.
That was discussed. The ultimate motion at site plan and plan commission was for either.
Okay, all right, very good.
Okay, you'd like to amend the motion to say that, Gary?
Pardon?
You'd like to amend the motion to include
Well,
that?
I'll amend the motion to do it as the option to them for the roof.
Okay, Chris?
Yep.
Second, okay. So we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of the garage accessory structure up with either a flat or pitched roof up to 46 by 50 for Capital Credit Union. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10C, action regarding site plan review for revised the Bohemian Park Phase 2, 2100 Holmgren Way, parcel VA-67-A-2. Aaron?
Okay, this is a do-over of a previously approved site plan for the Bohemian Park. Initially was approved as a 5-story building. They went out for bids, knowing the price of commodities right now for building materials. It came back much higher than was budgeted. In order to try to corral some of those costs, they are looking at reducing the 5-story down to a 4-story building. Overall, the building itself remains architecturally the same. It's just they're taking out, if you can imagine, like say floor 3 out of the middle and bringing the kind of architectural details associated with the top floor, including the penthouse and the patios and everything, just dropping that down 1 floor to make it a total 4-story building. Other than that, the site plan, the design, everything else is exactly the same. It's just it's now a 4-story building instead of a 5-story building. In terms of recommended conditions of approval, we have a few pretty standard, and they're basically the same as what was approved with the 5-story building. All metal panels are to utilize concealed fasteners. All ground-mounted and roof-mounted mechanical units and associated materials need to be screened from view from the subject property line and right-of-way boundaries. The catch-all meet all applicable parts of 17-2-200 of the municipal code. From engineering, contact utility operations supervisor for quote on connecting to village water main and stubbing 8-inch line to development. Cost to be charged to development and includes restoration of road and sidewalk. Stormwater management, verify the functionality of existing bioretention area and complete any maintenance required. Protect existing bioretention area with appropriate erosion control measures. From public safety, confirm the fire lane provided on the west side of the building to be 24 feet in width and turning radius is adequate for fire apparatus. A Knox box is required near the main entrance to the building. Provide an additional private hydrant on the west side of the building. Work with public safety on the exact location. Forestry approved the landscape plan as presented. From Bike and Ped, they had no comment, but they did note that bicycle parking is included in the parking garage, outside retail space, and lobby, and they're pleased with what was provided. Any other questions? I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, Maria Arena is also on the call.
Any questions? I have one comment. I'm sad that it's going from 5 stories to 4 stories. I understand with the cost of construction nowadays, though, but it's still a beautiful building. It's architecturally very pleasing, and I'd like to thank them for that. So it is very nice.
Thank you.
Aaron, is the bioretention area on the far west side of the property, and does that serve, will that eventually serve that whole development there?
That's actually a wetland area that will be preserved and enhanced at one of the final ends of the project. The bioretention area actually is in the middle of the parcel. It's kind of hard to see because it's still kind of grown up around it, but it is in the middle of the property.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, or I'll entertain a motion?
I'll move to approve the revision of Bohemian Park Phase 2, 2100 Holgram Way, parcel VA-7, 67-A-2.
With staff conditions?
With staff conditions, correct.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to recommend approval of the revised Bohemian Park Building Phase 2 with staff conditions. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10D, consider, discuss, act on village functional organizational chart. Joel?
Okay, thank you, Madam President, members of the board. At your Deas location, there's an updated copy of the functional organization chart that is being proposed for your approval this evening. This particular organization chart is really just more or less a visual depiction of basically the work, the functions and duties that are going to be assigned to each various service or department function within the village. The goal of this chart is to ultimately create a chain of communication or a line of communication that is clear and succinct. It allows us to accomplish our day-to-day tasks on a very efficient and effective level. In addition to that, this chart is being prepared in accordance to municipal code that was adopted back in May that bears the responsibility for the village manager to put together a plan of administration, which also includes the organization chart itself. I'm going to share my screen, so in case that you're unable to read this rather detailed chart, we can do that from the screen as well. A couple quick things that I want to make note that we made changes between what was provided to you in your packet and what is being presented tonight for consideration and possible approval is the change to the village assessor. Originally, we had talked internally that it makes sense to have the village assessor kind of more or less a function, if you will, or a responsibility of the village clerk's office to provide some oversight over. And the reason for that is the village clerk predominantly provides coordination for the village assessor as it relates to activities for the board of review, appeals of assessments and things of that nature. So oftentimes the assessor and the clerk are working conjunctively throughout that entire assessment process for each calendar year. However, upon talking with our contracted village assessor and some of the concerns that they had about what would be the long-term impacts having that function, assessment administration, under the clerk's office versus having it as a standalone appointed function by the village board, it was agreed internally anyway that we would separate those two functions. And so the chart that you have before you is a little different than what was reviewed by finance and personnel and different than what's in your packet. And it primarily reflects that change that the assessor is really kind of a standalone function. It is appointed by the village board. And ultimately how we have that set up here in Ashwaubenon is our assessor is appointed, not elected, and it is a contracted service for the village. So that's been identified on the chart. And then coupled with that, uniquely to Ashwaubenon, is we have an assessment technician. So we have a staff member that is actually on our payroll that performs kind of more technical work for our contracted assessor. And so we originally, as you recall, that assessment technician was placed under the direction of the village clerk, again, primarily because the assessment administration function had some oversight in that department. However, we've made that reflective of that change of shifting the assessor to its own core function. And that is in concert as well to a contract for services that we have with Fair Market Assessments, that we will provide a full-time assessment technician to support their efforts to conduct assessment administration for the village of Ashwaubenon. Beyond that, there aren't any other changes to the org chart that that was presented to you in your packet prior to tonight's meeting. By and large, this was, with the exception of that change for the assessor, presented to our Finance and Personnel Committee last week, and they did recommend adoption by the village board for tonight. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Before anybody makes any comments, I'd just like to thank the staff. They reviewed this org chart several different times and made comments about it, and I'd especially like to thank Joel because he really did a lot of work on this, so thank you. I'll entertain a motion if there's no comments.
I'd make a motion to approve the village organizational functional structure as shown. And I would like to also reiterate Mary's comments. I thought this is a really nice document. It's easy to follow. It'll provide good information for the village staff and board, and I think the residents of Ashwaubenon as well, and hopefully we'll get this out on the website to let them know where they need to go if they need help on a certain issue or whatever the case may be. I think it'll help move people to the right department as well.
Yeah, and I'll second that and kind of reiterate what Tracy said. This is one of the things I know, Joel, I asked for right out of the gate. Coming on board, this is extremely helpful to be able to, where does everybody fit? How do they fit in? So I think it's a great communication device that you can really help, not only internally, but also externally. So I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the Village of Ashwaubenon official org chart as presented. Any more comments?
The only comment I have on this, it shows how efficiently the village runs with the number of people. I just looked down the Public Works side of it. We don't realize that the small number that we have, and we run so efficiently with that number and doing a good job for our constituents.
Yep. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. 10E, action on Finance Department vacancy. Right.
Not sure if all of you know this. We had an employee resign, put in 2-week notice, and actually today was her last day. So that is our utility billing clerk. So that position, starting tomorrow, will be vacant. And so with that resignation, and actually in conjunction with a lot of the work that Joel's been working on with this hierarchy and other areas, it was an opportunity to review quickly the status of the finance department and potentially look at modifying that role and potentially another role within the department. So to give a brief history, over the past 10, 15 years, the department's taken on a lot of work and has not taken on any people. Specifically, it's taken on now the entire treasurer role. We've also modified our department in many ways to current times where, 10 years ago, we really weren't taking credit cards. We do that. That creates a lot of extra work behind the scenes. And then now, starting this winter, we'll be collecting taxes. So there'll be another role that'll fall on the finance department, which is all good and fine. We roll with it. We move forward. So what I wanted to do when I talked to Joel about was, hey, can we make a few minor modifications and not just replace the clerk, but maybe bring in, shift around a little bit and bring in another accountant level type position. When I started here 15 years ago, we didn't even have another accountant on staff. We have been able to do that about roughly 10 years ago. We did that. So I think where that would be helpful is what we're looking to do is take the existing role, essentially one of our employees who does our our AP and payroll clerk, and shift over into that role and carry on the backup responsibilities, because that was another area after the audit that we still have a few areas where we don't have solid backup, which is challenging in a department our size. But here was an opportunity, again, somebody who has that skill and background to maintain that within the village, but as a backup role. Slide over into the utility role, which is billing for the village, where we actually bill out our customers, where it's revenue coming in. We don't have necessarily a ton of it. We have enough. We bill out for, public safety might do cover a run, for example, so we'll bill out for something like that. And then also half that role is managing the support needs of the water and utility departments. So working with the crew out there on service calls, et cetera. Green Bay Water Utility does handle our billing and collections, but there still is a connection point there. We do the meter reads. We transfer that information to Green Bay and work with them almost on a daily basis through that process as well. So those functions would all stay within that role, but we'd be able to bring in someone in there who now can act immediately as a backup. So then that opens up the other position, and that would be the space to make that either an associate's degree at a minimum or a bachelor degree in accounting. And what that role would still maintain doing AP, running our vouchers, and then also doing payroll, but add a whole nother dynamic of skill set to that role and add in some of the stuff that is behind the scenes that I'm doing or Faith is doing, our accountant are doing some of the reconciliations behind the scenes. There's some of the credit card work that could be done that's really an AP function, but just has never been able to be moved over. So there's 3 or 4 specific reconciliation processes that role would take on. I feel comfortable with the right skill set to manage the processes, add more efficiencies to it, and add a little more value and be able to handle that added work. So, the real biggie is over the last year, especially with the treasurer role coming on, it will really help spread out some of those responsibilities and give us the due time. And tax collection obviously is going to be another big reconciliation process. Taking taxes is one thing, but then behind the scenes, there's a lot of work to get that reconciled and settle with the county and the other jurisdictions. So with that, is there an additional cost? Yes. This year, actually, no, based on the numbers I'm proposing, and I have the job descriptions attached. Due to a little bit of attrition, it'll be probably 4 to 6 weeks before we bring somebody in at this point, by the time you post the job, interview, and wait for them to come in. And then you also save, the pay and benefits of that attrition will cover the cost in the 2021 budget. We also talked, and it was brought up at Finance and Personnel as well, about adding more costs before we go through the budget. We feel comfortable that we'll be able to manage that additional cost within the budget that I would propose normally with the Finance Department. Because there is an allocation that these roles both have allocations to the utilities. That's something we've been doing for a long time. In the Finance Department, we act as almost a third party to the utilities, so they do get a portion of our time. And one of the added responsibilities to the role would be working more diligently with the utility fixed assets, which is an area of kind of weakness for us, and it would be helpful to have someone come in there. So there might be some minor tweaks that'll help spread some of that cost around equally and fairly. And we always work with Doug and the utility and the auditors to make sure that they're comfortable with the numbers we use as well. So from a cost perspective, the total net cost without doing any change in allocations is under 5 figures. It is only 4 figures. So it's not a huge additional cost, but I think in lieu of potentially adding someone down the road, it might be a good attempt to manage some of the workload we have now and see how this works over the next few years, just to get us through, especially with the transition of the workload. So again, an opportunity when it exists. Someone is leaving, I always like to look at the jobs and the roles and see what the current times are demanding. This did go to Finance Personnel. The only questions were somewhere the cost, but we did talk about how we could allocate that out and felt comfortable that we'd get through the budget without adding additional cost in that budget.
My only question, and I apologize, I wasn't able to be at the Finance and Personnel meeting. So it looks like the new requirement for education and experience is going to be an associate's or a bachelor's, and that will be a requirement.
It would be an associate's. We look at it 2 ways. The right candidate coming in, maybe a little bit younger, may not have the full accounting knowledge, but enough to get through the skill set that we're looking for. This may be a type of position that someone who wants to come in, learn, and when they want to grow. It also provides us a little bit of future planning. If other roles open up, we're kind of protecting ourselves. If the accountant were to leave, now we'd have someone that could slide into that role. That type of planning ahead. Also, if this is a real eager employee and to be quite honest, in 5 to 10 years, another opportunity opens up in another municipality, it's a good spring loading and we could backfill it back in with something like that. Obviously we hope that we can retain our employees, but those things do happen.
Yeah, I guess my only question was I didn't know if it would be worth listing something like, an associate's or bachelor's degree in accounting is required. However, if a candidate comes to you with 25 years of experience and very applicable accounting, but doesn't have an associate's degree, but meets all of the job requirements, would we consider them? So I guess I was just wondering if maybe it was worth potentially throwing in like a line that's, or applicable experience or, something along those lines, so we don't pigeonhole ourselves into saying, well, we said it's required. The only reason I say that is my mom has 35 years of experience and she wouldn't be interested in this, but, I just look at someone like my mom who has basically a CPA without being a CPA, but doesn't have an associate's degree. So just something to think about, I guess.
Yeah, and that could be an easy add, applicable,
Yeah, and I don't
range
know
of years.
how we'd word it or something, but just, X amount of experience or, would assess experience without, you get what I'm saying, but that's just the HR person in me coming out, so.
Yeah, I think it would more or less be something to the effect that a comparable amount of experience could be taken under consideration in lieu of education requirements.
Yeah, I didn't know. It's up to you guys if you want to add it, just a recommendation on my end. But other than that, I'm good with it.
In that same section, I was wondering if we should say, it says a minimum of 2 years equivalent work experience a plus. I don't know if we should say government, if we're looking for government experience would have more value than accounting experience, with a nonprofit or, a private business, if we'd want to list it that way, or if you feel the way it is fine.
Maybe as a plus, in that particular role, to be quite honest with you, running vouchers and payroll and that stuff is accounting.
Okay.
To know government would be a bonus, but it's just, here's an invoice, knowing how to read it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Greg, the one question I'd have, because I know you've been a proponent of kind of coming up with a shared services desk. Did you kind of look at that, especially when personnel move around? Is that something that we should be looking at this point to get that shared services type of, and again, I'm looking at the residents when they come in the building. Where do I go? Well, I got to go here for this. I got to go here for that. You've been the one pointed that out. Is this also the time that we should be looking at that? Okay.
I've got my own thoughts on that, but it revolves removing some walls.
You guys looked at each other. That was good. So it's been discussed.
It's been discussed, I think, absent of some physical changes to the building. I think it'll be a little bit challenging without those physical changes. Part of that conversation has kind of come up as part of our organizational chart conversation as well. And just making sure that we're aligning our functions within each department appropriately. That's a big component of our conversation. So part of the challenges that we were expressing before was an individual comes to the finance department for one type of permit or license, and then in order to complete their day's worth of transactions with us, they have to go to, let's say, the clerk's office and get another license. And then what they were finding out is they would have to go to public safety to complete another transaction. And if there's a way to streamline that process, that is what we were interested in. And I think as we sat down and we talked through the efforts, we were able to separate those things and combine them where necessary to try to streamline that, but then still logically place them in locations that make sense. So as an example, Aaron and Doug, they work directly with Patty, primarily on public works related work order issues, or community development, building inspection and permitting things. By and large, Greg's folks are really kind of more internalized now, where they're providing internal service to all the departments. And then Chris and her office are by and large handling kind of more that front desk effort with licensing and permits and things of that nature. Would it be great and wonderful to have kind of one front desk where it's kind of one-stop shopping? Yes. Again, I think absent of some type of physical alteration to Village Hall, it may be difficult at this time.
Okay.
You know, with this position too, there is going to be extra work in the finance department because we are going to be taking taxes. The county has decided that statutorily, they don't have to take our first payment of taxes. It would have cost us over $13,000 to have them do our first payment. And we made the decision that we were going to have our finance director and his staff and some part-time people take them. So that's added extra work for Greg and his staff. So I feel comfortable with this.
As I said at the Finance and Personnel Committee, as usual, Greg has done his homework on this. And as far as the cost on this, the additional cost on it, he's kept it very much at a minimum and definitely earned my trust, or I think everybody's trust here that this will be almost all covered, spreading it out. So I've got no problem. If there's no more discussion on this, I'll make a recommendation that we approve the changes to the utility billing clerk position and change AP payroll clerk to financial analyst position as described, and approve posting and filling positions immediately. And would that be with the changes that Allison put forth as far as description of experience? Yeah.
Yes, we'll add that.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Everybody understands the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
10F, consider, discuss, act on Personnel Handbook Update, Section 5.3, overtime/double time pay policy. So,
Thank you, Madam President. In our Personnel Handbook under Section 5.3, it addresses the overtime, double time pay policy as it relates to any non-represented employees. So these are our non-Ashwaubenon Public Safety Association officers, and it also tackles to some extent our exempt level staff that may or may not be eligible for overtime or double time pay. In review of this, it was identified that, again, as a cleanup effort, when the Public Safety Department instituted the captain position in late 2020, there were a few provisions within the handbook that needed to be updated, this section being one of them. And the reason why that was important is the captain position not being identified, in theory, I guess, would not make it eligible for the holiday provisions that are found in another section. So we wanted to make sure that our public safety captain positions are provided the same benefits as it relates to holiday pay that the lieutenants were receiving under the prior org structure. A couple other things as we looked at that cleanup effort, there were a couple components that we wanted to address that were not identified. The second one being that we wanted to identify that overtime may be at times required and scheduled as a condition of employment. So we do have occasions where we need people to come in under certain emergency situations that may require them to work overtime, or for special events or other activities like Packer games. And we wanted to ensure that we had the provision within our handbook to require that as a condition of employment. Overtime also requires prior authorization from the employee supervisor. So again, we did not have any provision within that section that creates that control to ensure that the supervisors provide that authorization, so that any employee, non-exempt employee, couldn't come into work and say, well, I'm going to work overtime this week. No, it needs some type of authorization from your supervisor first. In addition to that, we have a number of exempt employees that work a minimum of core hours, so they work their 40 hours a week, and oftentimes they work more than that, whether it be for meetings, events, activities, programming, or any very job-specific related emergencies. For those exempt employees, we wanted to ensure that they understand that they do have some flexibility in their schedule to provide some type of work-life balance. In particular, it was brought up at Finance and Personnel, Parks and Recreation, for example. Melody and David, they have a lot of evening and weekend programs and events. Because of that, we should be able to provide them some flexibility in their scheduling so that they can balance that work life. And by and large, Rex and his staff have done a great job at doing that. We just wanted to make sure that that was somewhat codified, if you will, within our handbook. And then finally, the other element that we identified is that some of our public safety supervisors, our captains and lieutenants, they do receive overtime benefits even though they're exempt staff if they work extraordinary events like Packer game days. Now we have an additional staff member that is exempt, and that be our Public Works Operations Supervisor, and he unfortunately was not provided overtime for working those extraordinary events. So as part of this policy amendment, we want to make sure that we provide fair and equitable treatment to our exempt staff that are required to work in those scenarios. And so this provision allows for our Public Works Operations Supervisor to be provided overtime in the event that they are working Packer, and then we included other NFL or even NCAA football games. And that would cover any of those events like a Badger game against Notre Dame in a couple years that employee would be eligible for that. They work in our Public Works Operations Supervisor works 10 plus hours on any given game day in order to set up, provide supervision and oversight for his staff that are also working that event. And so it's a pretty extraordinary occurrence for that position, one that no other community in the state of Wisconsin enjoys because they don't have a professional football team. There is a net cost to that, and I think we can certainly accommodate that within the department's overtime budget the way it is as it stands, but it is about $6,000 to $7,000 annually, depending on how well the Packers do over the course of the year and how many home games they may have as it relates to preseason and also with postseason activities. This item, again, was presented to our Personnel and Finance last week, and it was recommended for approval by the Village Board. I'll answer any questions that you may have.
I commend you for looking into this. I know there were some people that were working, you might say, for free here. We are fortunate to have the problem of an NFL team here in Green Bay, and that is an issue that we have to take care of through the public safety and the public works department. So I see this as a plus to be fair to everybody within the operation of the village here. So if there's no other questions, I'll move to approve this 5.3 overtime, double time policy.
I do have one question, though. Do we want to get that specific about Packer home games, things like that? What happens if Kenny Chesney shows up and does a concert? I am sure you do. Doug, you can probably answer this. I'm sure you do the same setup with traffic and everything for a Packer game that you would do for a concert like that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I know during the big concerts, our street stays, like Mike McCarthy stays the same.
It's really kind of dependent. If you remember a few years ago when that was after the Packers won the Super Bowl, there was the big concert and they ended up shutting an area down. There's going to be those one-offs.
And that's kind of what I'm wondering. Do we want to get it? I'm just more, the wording is more my concern. I think it's all valid. We need to do it. But I'm concerned, are we going to have to come back later and say, now we got to add this?
Before we are discussing this, could I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, Jay. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I think, and just to kind of answer, I think, Jay's question, and the reason why we got specific is because this particular individual or this position is an exempt position.
Yep.
So there are some expectations that these positions do put in hours beyond that core business time. And we've looked at, whether it be an individual that works in Parks and Recreation that has to stay late for a special event at the beach, or an individual that works as their supervisor in the utility department and may get called in for a backed up sewer, or a lift station is down or something to that effect. Those are considered job-related functions. The Packard game day itself, we viewed internally anyway, administratively, that's an extraordinary event that really no community has. And it requires our staff to go above and beyond what the normal call of duty is. And as an exempt staff.
And I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying to call it out specifically always makes me nervous, because then when the next thing happens, now we have NHL hockey shows up, you know? Now we have NHL hockey shows up. Oh, now we got it. I don't know. That's all I'm calling out.
Yeah, I think we recognize that, and as Doug had mentioned, we have special events and other activities that are kind of these one-offs, but because of this reoccurring issue, without creating that slippery slope, if you will, at that point, then we might as well look at all of our exempt staff as non-exempt staff, and then everybody is being paid overtime, and it becomes a challenge that way.
Correct. Yeah. So that was my only question.
To add to what you're saying, Jay, there's always events going on in this village. I don't know if there's any decent verbiage other than approved by the supervisor, and the supervisors are well aware of when an event comes to town. It could be the basketball tournament that the girls bring to the area in spring. I don't believe we're getting it right now. I think it's going to Madison, and hopefully it'll come back here, but our events just keep coming all the time. You take the walk, run events that come through here, they all want to come through Ashwaubenon. They don't want to go through Green Bay. So the safety department has to contend with that along with the road department. So I think as long as the supervisors are well aware of it, I think the verbiage is fine here. So that's my comment on it.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Yeah.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. 10G, 2022 budget overview. Greg.
So part of the budget timeline that went through in July was to come back to the board at this time and just kind of give an overview, a high-level budget overview. We kind of got away from that over the last few years, and we have some new members on the board and things like that. So just kind of where we're at right now in the process. We had a kickoff meeting last week. The staff is now working on their budgets. So all the departments are out there working their department budgets, working in the different funds, street development, all the different capital project funds, et cetera. They're out working their budgets and have roughly a month until about September 20th to turn them in. But in the interim, there's a lot of high-level items, and so one of the things that we put in the timeline was to talk about, what are the priorities of the board, what's the board's role in the budget process, if you will. Some of the key targets always are around tax rate, the levy. Some of our larger cost items are employee pay, obviously. So then there's cost of living adjustments to address each year, and then our health insurance is our second largest line in the budget every year. And then we've got all this talk of strategic plans, strategic objectives, and things like that. So, and then we get the ARPA funds added on there, which people are hearing about, wondering what we're going to do. So there's a lot to kind of just talk at a high level. Joel kind of put together a guideline sheet to kind of talk through it, and we just wanted to more or less talk through that, and then just talk through just an update where we're at, and then keep you in the loop. We'll come back in September and provide another update where we're at, so you don't just get a budget book on your desk in late October and go from there.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of tie in at your dais. Each of you should have received some guiding principles for budget adoption. Again, these are just kind of some big picture, quick hitter items that I think will be kind of the key talking points for the board as we go through budget deliberation process. And unlike maybe at the federal or state level, by and large, the local municipal level, your budget is your largest policy document because your policies are delved into the services you render to the community, and those services are based on a budget and based on the finances that are allocated for each area of service. So I look at it as this is your great opportunity to provide exceptional service to your community and to prioritize what that level of service will be across various functions and departments. This being my first budget process with the Village of Ashwaubenon, I really kind of try to focus on, with the elected body, what are the key priorities? I have worked in several different communities, and each board has a different outlook or expectation as it relates to the budget process. One community was very focused on tax levy. That was the bottom line. They wanted to maintain a flat tax levy. Other communities are very focused on tax rate. So the levy may fluctuate from time to time, but the rate we want to maintain. It's a very visual thing that our residents look at. And others are very, very progressive as it relates to meeting the service needs of a growing and a diversifying community. So service levels were ultimately what was discussed. So with the village board, what we want to kind of have that conversation revolve around is at a high level and more focused on policy. And so some of the big questions that the board should be asking throughout this process is our tax levy increasing or is it decreasing? In all likelihood, given today's environment with the cost of living increases and things of that nature, and just the cost of doing business, having a reduced tax levy is probably going to be difficult unless there's a substantial payoff on previous debt service, or maybe the closure of a tax incremental finance district where we all of a sudden get this kind of increase in value, if you will. Is the tax rate increasing or decreasing? Now this year, there's a couple things that are going to play into that, that may potentially play an impact on that. And first and foremost, we're going through a market adjustment for residential class properties. That inevitably will have an impact on your rate. And that rate may impact ultimately what your residential property owners are going to be paying in taxes. If our commercial class of property is going to be holding relatively flat, but our residential class of properties are going to go up 16 or maybe even 20%, that shift, that tax burden shift will be made to the residential class of property owners. With that, your tax rate may decrease if your levy is held relatively consistent year over year. So it looks good on paper, but when the residents get their tax bill at the middle of December, some of them may be unpleased by the fact that their tax burden went up because of the overall value of their property. So I think those are key things that we want to discuss with you, is how much of an impact will those changes in value and assessed value and the impact that has on tax rate and the shifting of that burden have in your decision making, because that will direct staff then as to what kind of our goals and parameters are. We're going through a strategic planning process. We're going to have that discussion again tonight, and by and large, what that will do is it will help us kind of dictate, are there going to need to be any service level changes? A good example of that conversation that we had at the last meeting was related to snow and winter maintenance on trails and sidewalks. That's a service level change. And so what priority does that have with the board, and does that need to take priority over maybe an existing service, or is it a service that needs to be rendered so much so that we're willing to increase our levy to support that effort? And when the budget is ultimately prepared and provided to you for deliberation, what we want to be focusing on is, why is the funding either being increased or decreased, either maybe by a line item, by a substantial amount, but by an overall department? Because those are going to be your key indicators as to what's driving budget factors, whether it's employee pay as it relates to cost of living increases, increased costs related to healthcare. Those are kind of our bigger drivers, and so those are going to be obvious. But if a line item increases by 50%, those are questions that I think are very appropriate for the board. We already talked about kind of the strategic plan, so I'll gloss over that. But when it gets to the brass tacks, if you will, and the bottom dollar, ultimately decisions have to be made, priorities have to be set, and ultimately there's probably going to be situations where reductions, cuts, or maybe holds are going to need to be made on proposed spending. And when we do that, I recommend a few things. First and foremost, program or service elimination should be the preferred option versus having poor or marginal quality programs or services, right? We don't want to say, well, garbage collection, why don't we just pick up half the garbage and then the other half will leave sit, right? You're not going to do that. You're either going to provide the service as a whole at a high quality level or you're not. So that's important. What we want to look at too is, as much as reasonably possible, village services that provide a private benefit should be supported in whole or at least in part by fees and charges for that service. And then it's really that consideration of what provides an individual benefit to your resident versus what provides a community-based benefit. A great example is swimming lessons, right? We don't provide free swimming lessons to everybody in the community. Individuals that want swimming lessons, they have to pay a registration fee. So by and large, maybe not in whole, but definitely in part, there's a benefit to the individual enrolled in swimming lessons, and so they pay a fee for that. A building permit is a good example of that. Although it benefits the community to a degree, it really benefits the individual that's constructing that project to ensure that it's done in a safe manner that meets building code. And so they pay that fee to do that. Ambulance service would be another good example, right? Somebody gets a transport from a facility to a hospital. There's a fee for that. They pay for that. There's an individual benefit to that person to have that service. One thing that I do not recommend is kind of across the board cuts or reductions. So, ultimately we say, okay, we have a levy we have a levy target that we want to hit. In order to hit that levy, everybody has to reduce their budget by 5%. I think that's kind of a lazy approach toward kind of handling your budget dilemmas, and it's really unfocused. Really what we want to do is focus on priorities and policy. Obviously, when we put together our budget, by and large, the department heads are going to be putting their budget together to meet a current level of service, and then also plan for the ultimate replacement and improvement of existing assets. And those are generally identified in various plans and other documents, whether it's a comprehensive plan, our strategic plan, a comprehensive outdoor rec plan. All of the plans that we've developed and adopted over the years have some type of project or recommendation in them. And so by and large, the department heads are pulling those recommendations and implementing them through the budget. So bear in mind that those are going to need to be consistent with that. And that's really by design so that those plans have value to the organization. I also point out, and this is really kind of more of a conversation for department heads, having worked as a department head before, I know how painful it can be, but at times we have to recognize that certain departments take a priority or precedence, or certain services take priority or precedence over others. And so some departments may take a larger burden or percentage hit when we're making those tough decisions than other departments. And it's no slight to that department head or to that agency, but sometimes we just have to understand that our priorities have to be somewhat unfair, if you will. On the backside, I have a few more. The other thing I point out is that any service changes, reductions, or adjustments to line items in the budget, we should be looking at those from a sustainable point of view and not just a one-off. A good example of this in a prior community, Doug will appreciate this, recycling revenues. Right? So every year we have a recycling revenue line item that accounts for the commodities that we receive for any recyclables that are taken to the county. Municipalities are notorious for hyperinflating that number or deflating that number to kind of meet their overall budget needs, because it can be at times a volatile market. And so sometimes they might artificially inflate that number to make their budget look good or to balance their budget. And that's kind of a one-off, right? Next year, you're going to be in that much worse of a situation if you haven't developed a sustainable way to fund a service. Priority from our standpoint will be towards the maintenance of current village assets versus new assets, right? So again, it kind of delves into that concept of we want to have high quality, whatever we have, even if it's a minimal thing, it's got to be of high quality, rather than having many things that are marginal or poor quality. And then again, reduction should not curtail the delivery of the core services in order to meet our legal requirements. We do have legal requirements that are written in either statute or municipal code, and we have to meet those obligations. As an example, we have to provide ambulance service. We have to provide fire protection. We have to provide police protection. How we do that may be up for debate, but at the end of the day, we have to provide it. We can't just simply say we're going to eliminate this service, even though it is required under statutory law. So with that, I guess what we would like to do is just maybe allow an opportunity for the board, if there's any key items that they would like to provide direction for village staff, as the departments are here kind of listening in, and they have kind of an idea of what the priorities are from the board at this point in the process, if any. If not, then what we will do is we'll kind of take these budget principles and implement them as part of our discussions internally before providing a draft document for your deliberation and review.
Joel, does the state have a levy limit that they implement still like they did in the past, or is that no longer there?
Levy limits are still in effect, and levy limits are based on municipalities' net new construction number. Ultimately, municipality cannot exceed its prior year's levy any more than either 0% or the amount of net new construction, whichever is greater. I believe last year we were at 2.7%. Now, for us, fortunately, my understanding is we are not currently at our limit from a levy perspective. Correct. So we have flexibility from that perspective. There are other municipalities that are completely up against their levy limit, and so they are bound to that percent increase that they experienced prior year in net new construction. So we have some flexibility, albeit, again, it kind of ties into that conversation of what's important. Is the overall tax levy important? Because ultimately the levy impacts the rate. If the rate's the end-all be-all, even though we may have room within our levy limit, doesn't necessarily justify from the board's point of view to meet that limit threshold.
Do we have any idea yet what the net construction will be, or does that come a little later?
I don't know that I've seen that. If it hasn't come out, it would come out pretty soon. I haven't looked for it either, though, to be fair.
I think the net new construction from last year was 2.7% for the village of Ashwaubenon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, last year, but is that what it's based on last year's, or will it be based on this year's?
Well, it's based on the prior year.
Okay.
So,
prior year, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be 2.7 then.
Right. So it's based on what the value is from January 1 of 2020 to the January 1, 2021.
Okay.
And that was 2.7%.
Okay.
And Tracy, right, wrong, or indifferent, we've typically been a tax rate village where we've looked at our rate and try to keep it
Below a certain.
percentage points or pennies
Yeah.
up or down, right? Just
Okay. Do we have any idea of cost of living? Has that been out at all, like for our staff? Is there a number out there right now?
So nothing formally to our staff in particular, but when we look at the Bureau of Labor
Yeah,
Statistics.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, for all urban consumers now from July to July, so July of 2020 to July of 2021, the overall CPI was 5.4%, which is extraordinarily high.
Yeah.
In talking with other municipalities, many of them are looking at a minimum of a 2% to a 3% increase in wages to account for that. Again, that's very preliminarily and not to a significant depth. I didn't reach out to a lot of communities, but just the ones in the area.
My question around the budget kind of dovetails into the next topic on the agenda. But I would like to see a cut of the budget based on strategic directives and initiatives. I don't know what your new software does, Greg, but I'm hoping that it can do that crosscut, because I know you have the operational budget based on this, but I would really like to see it, how is it basically customer facing for our strategic goals and that, and see how to, I know it causes different allocations to happen and all of this in order to be able to get to there. Because, for example, you have to be split into multiple directives and things like that. But I'd really like to see a cut of that, because I feel that also gives on the village and the board the ability to say, okay, here's where the operational budget dollars are going, instead of department by department. No, here's how it is going to improve the village based on the strategic plan. Here's where those costs are going. It's a different cut of the budget. I've done this in the past, and it's been extremely helpful to understand where is the majority of your dollars going and how are you using them based on your strategic plan to improve the particular organization, or in this case, the village. So I'd just like to ask if you can build that in. I know it's got to be different things in the budget to be able to allocate that, but I hope that we'll be able to get a cut like that.
We can certainly discuss that even more on the next agenda item, but one of the things that I think what we're striving to do with this budget document is to work towards achieving GFOA award for a distinguished budget, which will tie in our strategic plan into the budgeting process. But then separate of that, one of our action items in the strategic plan is to develop a kind of a performance management scorecard, if you will, that takes into that account and tries to tie in some of the financial aspects of it, the qualitative and quantitative measures that will be necessary to determine our outcomes. I don't know that we'll necessarily have that ready by November of this year, but it's certainly an action item that I think we can start to tackle sooner rather than later.
My experience in the past is that once you get that organized and established, is extremely helpful moving forward, because it allows everybody on the board, everybody within departments to understand that when these dollars are being spent, here's the strategic directive that we are reaching. And it's just very, very helpful. Instead of an operational budget, how are you doing, in public works? How are you doing in public safety? No, now this is another view of how are you doing it, which is really customer facing for the residents.
Yeah, I've seen this specifically in larger communities. They do this, but it's really you start with what we have today, and then I'll take the finance department and say we have 5 goals. We say what percentage of the finance department is applied against goal 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you look at each department, and then it's data that you can slice and dice and show.
Right.
We can still have that departmental view, but then you can have strategic plan view and. Right, so if ultimately safety is our highest of priorities, let's say in the plan, whatever, what percent of Parks and Rec is safety? And there is an element to that, right? You have, in inviting parks, you don't. So yeah, there's a way to do that, and that would be something we could certainly take a look at, and obviously over the years fine tune it as we work on the plan as well.
It's kind of taking that check stub idea and expanding it. Here's the way that this is being spent.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Okay, 10H, consider, discuss, act on Village of Ashwaubenon strategic plan. Joel.
Okay, in your packet is a draft strategic plan. This plan, as you know, we've been working on for the better part of several months, in particular over the course of several work sessions between key staff members as well as the village board. We've been able to essentially develop what we'll call our strategic planning framework, which ties into our mission, vision, core values, and 6 strategic directives. From there, and as part of our workshops, we develop goals that tie into each of those 6 directives, along with several key initiatives, between 3 and 4 for each goal. In our last meeting, we provided you a brief update of those key initiatives and objectives, and then indicated to you that at that point, staff will be working towards developing a list of action items that then would correspond to each of the initiatives. And so we have since done that. That information is included in your packet. As part of this process, we did ask that the village board obviously review these action items and then certainly provide feedback to us as staff in either altering, modifying, adding, amending, changing, deleting action items that they see would be most appropriate to ultimately work towards achieving our mission on a day-to-day basis, but also to reaching our vision in the future. So with that, I know that this is a rather lengthy process and does require quite a bit of detail and conversation. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you have with the draft document or entertain any discussion as it relates to how we can move forward with the document, either through another work session potentially or through the adoption of the plan itself tonight. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
First of all, I think this is a fantastic first draft, and I commend you, Joel, and the rest of the department heads and everything for coming up with this. I know we had our sessions where we sat down, pulled this, kind of got it kicked off. I personally believe that there are just a couple of more steps that need to be done. Number one, we need to set up a measurement for each action. If we can't measure an action, we really shouldn't be trying to do that action. You have to make it measurable so we can measure how are we improving ourselves. You need to understand the improvement over time, what's that time frame, and then we also need to actually get who's responsible. And I mentioned to Joel earlier, I think you look at this document, it's a great document. It's got everything in it. I think it might even be too much for the staff to be able to handle, because I think when you start to go out and you start to assign who's responsible for this particular action, I think you're going to find out some people are going to have a lot of actions that they're trying to deal with, and it's going to make it really difficult. And so I would propose that we take this and have another session where we sit down and go through this, look at these actions, try to assign how do we measure them, who's responsible for them, and then relook at, can we actually attain this with what we have. Again, we keep saying how our staff is so great and they're doing so much with so little. I don't want the strategic plan. Now they got to be looking at, well, okay, I got to make sure that I'm making this initiative, and I got to make sure I'm getting this initiative. So many things, it starts to become difficult for them to be able to manage their day-to-day work as well. So I'd like to take this off-site, and like I said, I commend what we have here, but I think there's some more thought that we need to put into it. With my experience in doing strategic planning, those next couple of items tend to be very, very difficult to figure out. The measurement and then the actual who's responsible for this particular action.
Okay.
That was well put, Jay. A couple things that I really didn't think about or take into consideration, but that's an eye opener. Yeah.
Yep, I would agree with Jay as well. I mean, we always say it came up when we were talking about our functional organizational chart. We're lean and mean, and that can be good and that can be bad. And we don't want to overwhelm our staff. I think our staff at times now is overwhelmed already, and we need to keep that in consideration. So I agree with Jay. I mean, let's make it reasonable that the staff can actually do it, and maybe there's things that need to be put out a few years that maybe aren't quite as important at this point, and really dive into it a little bit further. It is a really good document, don't get me wrong, and I know staff put a lot of time into it, but I think it needs to be reasonable and that we can actually achieve it.
And Joel, yeah, you did a great job putting this together.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, visually, this is really impressive. This is just a nice job. But listening to Jay speak a little while ago, I started thinking, you know, and we do talk about a lot about how well our departments are running. It's absolutely true. And maybe we try to get a little sense from the staff, not just the department heads, or including department heads, but from the staff underneath them, what drives that? What's, you know, so we can help pare that down and get an idea what's keeping them motivated and what's driving them to keep everything so tight and balanced and to keep going and keeping this community running with such efficiency.
You know, I think first of all, there is a lot of information here, but we worked all summer to gather this along with the staff putting it together the way it is. I always viewed this thing as something that we put together. We will do baby steps to get this thing going. And as time goes on, we'll increase going into this to make sure that we are reaching the goals that we're trying to obtain here. So I think it's just a time thing and a little effort on each other's part to achieve this as time does go on.
Okay, so do we need a
Do we need
motion?
a decision on this?
So I think what I would recommend is if the board is in agreement, I wouldn't take any action on the strategic plan this evening. So maybe a motion to postpone action on the draft strategic plan until after an additional work session can be held to kind of further refine some of the action items within the plan and to do some of the items that Jay had discussed as far as setting up timelines, responsibilities, and measures. I think that's certainly appropriate, and just kind of tying into some of the comments that the board had. And I'm going to speak on behalf of the department heads here, but I think we always appreciate what direction we're going. And we appreciate it when we hear that directly from the board because it makes our job easier to know what we need to present to you and bring to you for your approval. There's nothing like having our wheels spin that is more difficult and frustrating for us is to have that happen. So if we have good, clean direction from the board on this, it will only benefit our staff in getting them the tools and resources that they need to be successful, or at least set up for success anyway. So my recommendation would be a motion to postpone action until after an additional work session can be held to further deliberate on the action items.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to postpone the adoption of the strategic plan.
Under discussion, can I just ask a question? Would it be all right, Joel, for us? I have some comments on the document itself, and if anybody else has any to put those forth to you, just email them to you or something. So if anyone else has comments on the plan itself, maybe send them forth so it'll keep things moving a little bit better.
Okay, everybody understands the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. 10I, preliminary 2022 150th anniversary plans and discussion. Rex.
Well, 2022 is our 150th anniversary.
We don't even look that old, Rex.
No, we don't. We're looking pretty good for our age. No, it's a great time, you know, for our community. I mean, I think we're one of the forerunners, and we should be proud of I think how we're viewed by all of our surrounding communities. I know back in, I seem to be the old guy here. I thought I'd never be saying that, but I think might be the only one in this room that was at the 100th anniversary back in, were you there, Mayor?
I was there.
Back in 1972. And Jay? Okay. What's that? Yeah, and Greg wasn't born yet.
Figured as much, Greg. Yeah.
So it was a big wing ding back in 1972. It was at the original community center. I mean, there was like literally a circus and elephants, and there's a parade that went all the way down to Lambeau, and back up Oneida Street we had the Apollo astronauts. We had the Glenn Miller Orchestra. I mean, they got like big time things back in the day for the 100th anniversary. Now that was a different time, obviously, and different community events have gone on since then and taken the place of a big wing-ding like that. But that being said, we're at 150, and that's certainly something to commend the village on itself. So we're looking at, and I guess, being the Park and Rec Department, I'm kind of the de facto lead on this. But we're looking at planning a 150th anniversary of the village. I included in your agenda packet a page from the Centennial booklet, which was probably about 80 or 90 pages long, a list of events that was happening back in the day in 1972. And what I've been doing is we've worked with, in fact, our third meeting, which anyone is welcome to attend, is tomorrow, 3 o'clock at the community center, working with different community groups, trying to get different ideas for what they would like to see happen at the 150th celebration. And that's what I'm presenting to you tonight as well, and I'll ask you the same question. What would you like to see happen? We've got a very, very, very tentative schedule of events for the week-long celebration in 2022, which would be August 8th through August 14th. We wanted to do a week-long celebration, and then we wanted to expand the Ashwaubenon Blast, which is kind of our big community celebration. Didn't take place the last 2 years, obviously, but we certainly plan on doing it in 2022 as part of the overall sesquicentennial. So a couple things that are going on. We've got, as you can see, events Monday through Sunday. There's information on page 2 as well. Expanded blast. We've got potential fireworks, a Who's Who dinner, a series of concerts, and one thing that's not on here that Kate Green just got word from last night is potentially PMI might be working with us and sponsoring an evening concert during that celebration week as well. That would be village residents would certainly be able to attend. So there's a lot of things happening. The schedule is very fluid. I wanted to put it out there to you for ideas. I'll be honest, there's a lot of big ideas, a lot of small ideas. All of those ideas are going to cost dollars. Don't know what the village is willing to come forth with on this, or how much the village wants to support its own 150th. Certainly there will be quite a bit of fundraising going on by some staff, as well as by the Ashwaubenon Alumni Association members, to try and increase the offerings at the blast itself, which now is looking to be on a Friday night, all day Saturday, and that potentially Sunday morning, but Sunday morning looks like we might be doing a pancake and porky breakfast. We're going back and forth between Ashwaubenon Park and over at the community center. In case there's rain, we still have that option of having it then. So anyway, I just wanted to bring this forth. If there's any ideas out there, please contact me, or you can bring them out on the floor right now of anything that maybe you've attended with other municipalities, what they've done for their grand celebrations when they're at 100 years or 50 years or 150 years. Certainly looking, or if you have feedback on what we have on paper right now. Or if you know where we can get 4 elephants to parade down the street, that would be awesome as well.
How about bringing back the beard judging on day 1 of the 100th?
We can certainly, are you willing to be one of the judges, Allison?
Was that really a thing?
Yeah.
bearded judging?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's come back a little bit, so.
There's a picture in the 100th book of the beards. Several of our staff grew their beards.
Oh
And
my God.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, all ends of the spectrum. You got the elephants, you got the Apollo astronauts, and
I'm not ordering
you got the beard judging.
Not ordering elephants. Maybe llamas, but not
And skydiving, I see.
skydiving.
This is,
Yeah, I ain't
this
doing
is
that
so
either.
intriguing to me.
How about, again, me being a bicyclist, how about a bike ride? How about a walk or a run as part of the events? The Oneida Nation looked like they participated on the 100th. Maybe the Oneida Nation might want to be involved in some manner.
So a lot of the events, just because of the organization and the amount of time involved, I mean, we've talked about parades, we've talked about runs. We've told many of the community organizations, if you would like to do an event and run that event, we'll add it to the schedule, and we'd be happy to do it, you know, to work with you to advertise it and to put it on. I think that takes a little bit of the burden off of the staff to actually try and create more and more events on top of what we already do during the course of the summer. A lot of it back in the day, and again, this doesn't really, it's only one page that you're showing here from the Centennial booklet, but a lot of the events were run by the community organizations. It was their event. They chose what they wanted to do. They said, we'd like to do this, and we'd like to run concessions at this event. And then we would make money off of our own event that we're putting on. So if anyone wants to do anything like that, that's kind of what we're trying to work through at some of our community organization meetings, Tracy, is just to see what's out there and what, you know, volunteer levels look like from each one of the organizations, what they'd like to commit to.
One thing we've done in a different community that I worked for, we did kind of a government day, I guess we would call it, and we had the public safety department come out with all their equipment. We had public works come out with some equipment. We also had the other departments, whether it was finance or administration, come out, and people could, you know, just, it was in a big parking lot, and people could go look at all the equipment, talk to the different department heads, talk to everybody. It was easy to do, and the community really loved it, especially going into public safety and the big old garbage trucks and all of that. So it's not that difficult to do, and it's a good way to showcase the village.
Good idea. That's what we're looking for. That'll be brought up tomorrow at tomorrow's meeting.
It's the old Park and Rec director coming on me. Sorry, Rex.
Any other thoughts?
No, we'll be.
All right, if you have them, I mean, you don't need to come up with them, as I said, right this moment. But this is a very fluid document. We're working through it. Sounds like the brochure, if you've ever seen it before, like I said, it was like about a 90-page booklet. We're working with a particular printing company, and we're looking at trying to publish that again. It tells a lot about the village, the history of the village, what our current department and service levels are, and most of that looks like will be paid for through advertising within the booklet. So it's a win-win getting that out to the public about a month ahead of time beforehand, and not being charged to us. So we are working on that as well.
Yep.
Rex, just one comment I wanted to make. And I have no idea on cost, but you know, you had kind of said, how much does the village want to fund our own 150th? I mean, I definitely think there's going to be some extra here and than what's in a normal budget. And I think that's something that I personally would want to see, that, you know, we don't just expect other people to throw the village our own little party, that we invest in ourselves too and our citizens. So I have no idea on the number or even the remotest idea what this is all going to cost. But
Yeah.
I do think it is worth, you know, looking at, like you said, it would be proposed in the 2022 budget. I do think it's worth, this 2022 might be slightly different than any other year because of this big accomplishment. So that's all my comment is I do think it should be treated slightly different. So that's all.
I agree. I mean, we're going to have to put some funds into this celebration.
And we don't know what anything is going to be running. We need to solidify our schedule, even though it seems like, oh, it's a year away. Well, you literally need to plan something like this a year in advance. So then once you get your schedule down, then you can start working out all the details and all the many aspects of the special event or of the celebration. In our meetings, they can sometimes get lengthy when different groups and individuals are discussing special projects or special events or special activities that they'd like to see happen. And the meetings can go on, which is good discussion, for quite a while. So what I was hoping to do by bringing this to you tonight is, number one, to get some ideas floating out there. Are you happy with this? Do you have more ideas? I like your idea, Tracy, of with the different vehicles from the different departments and having basically a big show and tell, so people can see what their tax dollars are getting them, and they get to touch the stuff that they might not normally get to see. So that's another nice aspect of the event that could be going on. But we don't know what all this is going to be running or costing. We still have a lot of donation and fundraising to do. I was just hoping to try and get some of it out and people thinking ahead of time, so that when we do discuss it, it'll go smoothly in terms of what's everyone looking for. So.
Okay, keep those ideas coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Number 11, items for next agenda. We do have to bring the fingerprint fees back. We're all aware of that. Anything else? Give the village a call. Okay, number 12, closed session items. During the meeting, the village board of the Village of Ashwaubenon may convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin's statute section 19.85, parent 1, parent G, for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel concerning former Ashwaubenon Public Safety Officer Scott Schermitzler litigation in which it is currently involved. The village board may thereafter reconvene in open session pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 19.85, parent 2, to report the results of the closed session and consider the balance of the agenda. I need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to go into closed session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, we have to do a roll call vote. Sorry.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
President Kardowski,
Yes.
Trustee Paul,
Yes.
Trustee Zerbal,
Yes.
Trustee Williams,
Yes.
Trustee Krieger,
Yes.
and Trustee Flukie.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
This conference is no longer being recorded.